Let's talk now about this media tempest from the standpoint of Catholic social teaching on marriage, children, and adoption. We're joined by a passionate parenthood and adoption advocate, Catholic writer, thinker, and commentator, Leigh Snead, a fellow at the Catholic Association. Leigh, it's so great to have you here with us. These criticisms of Pope Francis's comments, they seem to ignore the dropping birth rates and the growing foster care crisis here in the U.S., which has been aggravated by the pandemic. I know you've talked about the opioid crisis. As an adoptive parent yourself, how did you interpret Pope Francis's comments?
Well, Montse, I'm always happy when you and anyone, and especially the Holy Father, brings the public attention to adoption and foster care. And, obviously the people, the declining birth rates and people not as being as open to life as maybe, we are called to be. I did see that overall, this was a very positive thing. And the one thing I really liked about his comments was he talks about the risk. And I think a lot of people focus so much on that when they think about adoption and the possibilities of, what could be, especially if you're thinking about an older child, a child who suffered trauma or something. And he reminds us that whether you have a biological child or you adopt, there's always a risk. I mean, the child is a stranger that we welcome. It's it's that kind of unbidden hospitality that we're called to. So I think overall, I thought he was very honest, and I thought his comments were very reassuring.
I love that. It was reassuring for me as well, because that riskiness is something that stops us from being open to our neighbor, and being distant during the pandemic has really aggravated that. From the perspective of church teaching, how are we supposed to consider the issue of children versus pets that Pope Francis brought up? Let's take a quick listen to Archbishop Christophe Pierre's comment on that first.
It's just a kind of, basic wisdom, We live in a society where a lot of people have difficulty to have children today, and for many reasons. Some reasons are valid, but some other reasons are not. There are also so many children who are in need to be adopted, to receive a caring and a good family. So I think the Holy Father, he's fully in his role to say that.
Leigh, what's your take on this?
I think that my children would probably be, happier if I was more interested in pet parenthood. But I think that the underlying premise, I think that if you busy yourself with any sort of, and I'm sorry, but I know that your personal relationships with pets are very real, and I have had dogs and I've loved them and I experience that unconditional love that I get from them. But it's still, a purchase. It's a material investment, just like be a career or education. And I think that it's possible that you can put so much time and energy into those things that you put off parenthood. And I think that that's either people get complacent in their role as, a potential parent, or or that you run out the biological clock. So I think that there are those dangers there. I wish that the waters hadn't been muddied with the discussion about pets, because I think pets are great. And also I really would like the language to change with pets too. I don't like the idea that adopt is often, because my ears always perk up whenever I hear the word adopt or adoption, and it's almost always about animals and not children. And so I wish that language would change.
A lot of that has to do with fear, Leigh. I know that that's something that has been part of the discussion. And in his remarks, Pope Francis kind of walked into that, talking about our own orphanhood. He said, because we live in an age of notorious orphanhood, don't we? It's curious. Our civilization is something of an orphan, and this orphanhood can be felt. May St. Joseph, who took the place of the real Father God, help us to understand how to resolve this sense of orphanhood that is so harmful to us today. What do you think he meant by that orphanhood?
I think that he meant, that we're living, a lot of people without any idea of, God the Father, and not in any kind of spiritual parenthood either. I mean, even especially like I mentioned with the COVID crisis and the isolation that came with that, we're missing out for opportunities for that spiritual parenthood between friends and families. And I think that is an orphan, but that's also because I think we're not called to live, or people aren't answering the call to live as Christians with God the Father. And through St. Joseph, of course, we understand that our relationship as a Christian person is based on adoption. The line of King David is Christ through Joseph, not through biology. So I think that's part of it. I think the idea that we're orphans, I think that calls to mind a sort of a visceral loneliness, an abandonment, and also just a sense of feeling lost.
And feeling lost is something that I think we can all relate to, but in finding that spiritual adoptive line to Jesus Christ, right? Knowing that we are adopted sons and daughters of God by virtue of that is something that should be reassuring. Do you think that fear and that lack of understanding that we're adopted is something that stops others from wanting to adopt?
I think so. And I think that, I think people don't like what's not common to them. I think that, outside of your lived experience, we're lucky here in South Bend that adoption is so common that my son growing up would always sort of be surprised when someone wasn't adopted. And it's through either foster care, a lot of people in our community foster children, and so many people have either both biological and adopted children or just solely adopted children. I think people often follow the promises of, contemporary fertility medicine that, promises sort of to give you everything you want. And people want to see themselves reflected back in their children because it's what they grew up doing, especially if they're a biological offspring of their own parents. But the truth of the matter is, you see it in your child, no matter where, they came from, where their biological beginnings were, because what they become is what you've made of them in your own family.
And we see that in your beautiful boys. Thank you so much, Leigh.
Thank you, Montse.